This is Tim.
This is Jason.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Jason in Portland, Oregon. How are you doing?
Delightful, Tim. Delightful. As you can see behind me, we have sunshine today.
Yeah, usually I've seen you in a basement somewhere and there's no light anywhere. It looks like it could be any time of day when I see you there. But
summertime Jason.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So we haven't had a Critiquing Comics in a while because there weren't any comics to critique, but we finally got one.
We scared people away with our sharp criticism.
I guess so. So we did finally get one sent to us called The 9 Circles, Marshal Law, #1, from Blood Moon Comics, which I took a look at their website. They do have several other titles. They're all kind of in the, I don't know, horror or kind of creepy type of vein. This one is kind of a horror western, kind of in the same genre as The Sixth Gun. Do you remember that book that came out from Oni?
I remember the logo. I never picked it up.
Cullen Bunn and Brian Hurt. Yeah, I read the whole thing. I was looking back. I couldn't remember how long it had been since it finished. It was 2016. It took a while to get it done. The 50 issues. Anyway, we're not talking about that book. So, The 9 Circles. So it starts out with this guy. He's dressed as a cowboy. He goes to confession. And so that was interesting. We've got a black priest, which I would think would have been rare in the Old West. I'm not quite sure if that's actually where we are, the Old West. But also the priest is drinking from a flask, which probably some priests have done.
I can say drinking from a flask is wildly inefficient because those things only hold a couple ounces. You want to bring a bottle to work.
Yeah. So then this small church is attacked by 3 demons, and there's a fight, and the cowboy manages to banish them from his plane of existence, I guess. Turns out he's an archangel, which the priest kind of looks down his nose at. And then we have a suddenly flashback to 2 years, and right in the middle of the book, a story title and credits, which felt really odd to me. I've never seen the story title and credits that late unless it's at the very end of the book. It felt like we were just starting a backup story.
I got the feeling that this has a cinematic pacing to it, in that, like, on page 1, there is, I want to count this. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little panels of a candle just flickering and going out. And that's a laborious way to show time passing in a comic. I will say, actually, I think the book gets better midway through, because in the beginning there is this priest, and there is the drifter archetype, right? Think of Preacher or any of those Clint Eastwood westerns where he blows into town to solve someone's problems and leave. We've seen this before. And I also got a bit of Preacher in here, I thought. And you could definitely, maybe a bit of Johnny Blaze, like the Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider. So, yeah, the beginning here, there is a sense of humor that humor is subjective, and it's either going to work for you or it isn't going to work for you. But there's a lot of, like, quips, and I got to be honest, they don't all land. There's one demon that has it's like sort of fiery brimstone, and the outlaw drifter character says, "So that's what a hot flash looks like." So, I mean, that might land for somebody. I got to be honest, the tone and the humor of this didn't really land with me too good, too well. But, you know, I think I got to the end of this and I thought, it's done. Like, it's really, this looks like a self-produced, self-effort, and I congratulate the team for getting it done, because that's the hardest part of making comics, is getting the first thing done. And because the credits come in so late, I was like, oh, if this were a graphic novel or a 90-minute movie, a 90-minute B movie, you might get the titles that late in or after the opening scene.
Yeah. Maybe they're thinking about the trade, because this is a continued story at the end of
Yeah.
this issue. So when it's all put together in a trade, that might not seem so late in the book to put in the credits. But
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's par for the course for an HBO show or something. I do think it gets more interesting at the midpoint where we go to limbo
yeah.
and we get the title. This feels more like a Twilight Zone episode, and for me, this is really where it picked up. That opening, I felt like I had seen that opening before, and it wasn't so interesting in the posturing and the one-liners. But that there's a limbo, and all these characters throughout time are in this Western limbo. I was like, you know what? Okay,
Yeah, looks like a saloon.
yeah, with some like demon artifacts on the wall, and I'm like, all right, it picked up a little bit. This is interesting. I thought this is probably where you probably could have started here, but that's okay. And there's some supernatural shenanigans, and I was like, okay, all right, now I'm getting interested. I do have questions.
The saloon is populated by people like Socrates and Homer and Saladin, so that's kind of interesting. They look a little out of place in a Western saloon, but whatever.
I think that's the charm of it, right?
Yeah.
This is what purgatory looks like. So then we find out that the character that we see in the beginning is a marshal, really like the Timothy Oliphant type archetype. And as far as story goes, it gets more interesting at the end, but it's still, I don't know, Tim, what would you say?
I thought the story idea was interesting. Like you said, the quips don't always land, but I was more finding some problems with the art.
You're talking about Kool as Heck?
Yes, Kool as Heck is the name of the artist. Jaimie Engle is the writer, and the colorist is Kristal Sayers. So I felt like the artist can draw still shots fine, but action is kind of a problem. There's a place in that first scene where he's fighting the three demons, and one of them is a woman, and in one panel she's way off on the other side of the room, and the next panel she's got her legs wrapped around the marshal's neck. And like, how did she get there? It just...
I don't know. He also throws her over the shoulder, and it's unclear really what happened. Yeah, the art it's a little clunky.
Yeah, there were some places I just didn't know what was happening.
Yeah, I agree. And also there's when he sends somebody back, there's an extreme close-up on his face, and it wasn't clear to me in the beginning that was the outlaw character and not just like the voice of God or some sort of floating apparition.
Right, and there's some maybe Hebrew letters, and then it says, "To the dry wasteland I send you," each time that he gets rid of one of the demons.
Right. Yeah, the action's a little clunky. I want to ding the lettering, too, because he says the exact same thing every time. And there's a lot of dead space in these balloons. I think these balloons are coming out of like a program. It's not Illustrator. It's not done in Adobe or anything. I think it's just like an out-of-the-box lettering. And I would just remind the team to try and make the make the text the shape of a balloon first. There's a lot of dead air. And I'll say in this entire comic book, there isn't one word that's italicized in the dialogue. The dialogue is all regular font. And
no bold either.
Yeah, when you can italicize a word, it just helps create the rhythm and the cadence of a regular conversation. So it's not just text, right? Lettering isn't just text. It's sort of this middle ground of design where you're working in congress with the art. So a lot of these, they're just not, like the words are pushed to the top of the balloon and there's some dead space at the bottom of the balloon. It seems like a nitpick, but it's one of those little things that you can do to not distract from your comic book.
Mm-hmm. Something else I noticed, and I'm not sure, I mean, this is partly the colorist's problem, but maybe it's the artist's problem too. And this is something that I experienced myself back when I was doing my comic these many years ago. So what I did was I drew on paper, inked on paper, scanned it, and then colored it in Photoshop. And if you're not careful, you end up with little places where like you didn't get it black, and so there are a few pixels that are empty, And then if the colorist misses them, then you've got this little white speck in your art. Or it could be a place where there's a little bit of white space, like under an arm that's off to the side of the panel. And if the colorist misses that, then you got this white spot there in a panel that isn't at all white otherwise. So you have to be careful of, every little area of the panel.
Yeah, and I would say the color-wise, there's a lot of browns in this book. And it's sort of, I had a hard time sometimes, the people in the foreground and the background were like the same color.
Well, and in fact, there was one point on page 22 where it looks like part of a man's suit is colored the background color, the brown, when his suit is supposed to be blue. Either that or else he really lost weight, because you got the blue lapel, and then behind that is just brown, the same as the background. So I think the colorist kind of got lost there of what she was coloring.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know what the metric of success here is, and it's hard to critique this because this isn't of the quality that you would find on the comic book shelves, generally. So what's the metric? Like, they did it, it's done. I think that's awesome. It's really hard to make a comic book, so I commend the team for that. I think the color palette is a little limited. I'm just confused too. They're in limbo, but people will fall down and be like, "Oh, you should just have some ice for the bruise on your head." Like, aren't they spirits? Aren't they dead? It's weird. Like, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's part of the charm of it. Okay, so going forward with the team, I would highly suggest that you take your text and shape it the balloon. Like on 22, when he says, "Won't take no for an answer, I'm afraid." It's like this long oval balloon over 2 lines of dialogue. I feel bad critiquing this comic because they're really trying, and I just think I don't know anything about this team. If they graduated from the Kubert School of Art, then I've got some feedback. If this is, a young team getting something done for the first time, I really appreciate the energy in it. I think this is, again, not even in the comic. The artist's name is Kool as heck. And again, what's the metric of success? If this person's looking to build a career and get hired by other people, I hate to say it, but I think that name would be a barrier. I don't know if it's a pen name. If their parents really named him Kool as heck, maybe get a pen name. I mean, Matt Faction is a pen name. It's just, working in professional spheres, often you can do a comic book and that can show people what you're capable of and get hired. But if you're independently wealthy and this is all you want to do, go for it. I think transitioning into a professional practice, that's going to be a barrier for people that hire me, I think.
How come?
Kool. It just sounds like, are you going to hire someone named Kool as heck? It just sounds it sounds like it's a young name, right? It just doesn't sound professional. I hate to get hung up on that. I work with students all the time, and I'm trying to position them for success. So my feedback here isn't that I don't think that's a cool name. I just don't think that name can travel very far in a professional space.
Yeah, it sounds a little braggy.
Well, it doesn't say talented as hell. It says cool as heck. The artist may be a really fun person to hang out and drink with. Based on what they're drawing, I would probably be drinking buddies with Kool as heck. I think the art style has places to go. Specifically, I think there's the same line width, the same. This could be drawn with a pen, like a out of the store pen, but whatever the line width is, it never varies. So having thicker line width for stuff in the foreground, thinner line width for stuff in the background will help create scale. I think the artist could work on the depth of field, and that is making spaces feel like they have a foreground element, a middle ground element, a background element. A lot of the characters sort of seem like they're all on the same flat layer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing my comic, I had that advice of making thicker lines for things in the foreground, and I thought it worked pretty well. It looked sharper.
Yeah, it's just, your brain wants to interpret. Your brain wants to understand space. So, and the special effects of them shooting the demons, it's too much. It's a bit distracting. It's hard to tell what's happening. But like I said, I do think the story has potential. I think it picks up in the middle part. once they go into this limbo. I think it becomes more interesting. I would want more of that, but that's just me. There's also some religious iconography and elements brought into here that I'm probably just wildly ignorant of. So I have to concede I'm probably not the audience for this.
Yeah, there were some other things that I didn't get what was happening. Like when there's a corpse that's been inhabited by a demon that comes into limbo, and you get these panels where like there's a steam train going by outside and there's light and sound, but I didn't know what that was supposed to mean.
Me neither. I believe it's the Marshal coming to town. He had to be summoned. He was somewhere else in limbo. I don't know. I had a hard time with that as well, because there's no establishing wide shot of the train. There's just close-ups on what eventually, I guess, become a train. The visuals, I noticed that in the very beginning too. We don't start with an exterior shot, and this is what I mean by cinematic storytelling. Like on page 17. There's a shot of a window, and then there's a repeats with the light outside. It repeats, the light's gone. It repeats, the light's back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like that's cinematic storytelling. That's not comic book storytelling. You need to show us the train. You need to show us what's outside at some point. You don't build suspense the same way in a comic as you do in live action media. You just don't. Also,
I'm not clear when. I guess I went into the scene thinking the Marshal was there, but he wasn't. I guess he shows up on page 20 when the animated corpse has been cut in half. But I thought the entrance of the Marshal should be emphasized more because I kind of missed it.
I think the story's in the wrong order, to be honest. I think you should have started with part 2 and then gone into the last part. Because this is like
we've already start out in limbo.
Yeah, we've already met him. Then to do this big build-up to introduce a character that we just met.
Right.
I guess that's pick one or the other.
I took for granted that he was in this scene, even though he wasn't for some pages, because we just met him before. And then, we go back 2 years, and now he makes a big entrance. So, it's a little...
Is it 2 years or 2 weeks?
I think it said 2 years. The Realm of Limbo, Hell's First Circle, 2 years earlier.
Okay, I think the easiest fix is just to rearrange the pages of this. Honestly, I think you start off with your most interesting conceit, which is this limbo space, which I think is the coolest thing in the comic.
Yeah, the Limbo Saloon.
And then you could jump 2 years or jump and show him in action. But this limbo thing builds up and introduces this character that we've already met.
Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced that the bit with the confession is necessary at all.
No.
And I don't know where the story's going after the first issue, but it just seems superfluous.
Yeah, I want to be kind because they did this book and it's done. It's in the world. I just think it's I think it's a young team. I think they're still finding their strengths in storytelling. But
I agree. Start with the saloon. That's a stronger opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know they say open on action, but when you have a conceit that's strong, I wouldn't bury it 10 pages in. And the opening just felt like something I'd seen. We've all seen that sort of posturing drifter thing before.
Yeah.
So what else was on Blood Moon? So did they send you any other comics?
Well, I looked at their website. So there's something called Endangered. Humanity's become an endangered species after nuclear war. The survival of our species rests with a group of scientists aboard a low-orbiting space station. So that's kind of post-apocalyptic. There's something called Usher of the Dead. There's something else, not of this world. So, they all look kind of creepy or post-apocalyptic or something like that.
Yeah, which is my wheelhouse. I guess if I have any feedback, really, for the writer, Jaimie, is as you advance and you evolve your craft, find your voice. Find the voice that's only you could say these lines of dialogue. We all have inspiration that we draw from. I love the Clint Eastwood archetype. I love Preacher. I love Timothy Olyphant and his many Marshal roles. I think there is still lifeblood in this genre I just think double down on your voice. What can you write that no one else can write? Because there's a lot of stuff here that it's sort of stock character situations. It's sort of the dialogue isn't extremely unique. I think it's really, really paying homage to stuff that we've all seen before. So I would really find your voice. Like it's just so much of this dialogue I feel like it's cut and paste from other stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not for me. And I think I would just double down on you and your voice and what you think you do well, and take your inspirations, but evolve past them and make them put Jaimie's stamp on them.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So, if you would like us to critique your comics, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Why are you laughing?
Because we were just so hard on these people. We're just so hard. Please send us your comic. We can kick you like a stray dog in the street.
Well, yeah, I've been feeling like that for some time, but people keep sending their comics.
So can I tell you, like early on, Stephen Grant? He wrote The Punisher. He wrote like the classic Punisher miniseries. He had a column 20 years ago on CBR. I forget what it was called. And he would review indie comics. And I remember thinking, I love Stephen Grant. The guy wrote The Punisher. He wrote all these great things for Marvel. So Tony Talbert and I, we sent him copies of Less Than Hero, the book our very first book. And this is like 2003. And Stephen Grant ripped him apart. And he's like, I don't know why people want to do bad Jack Kirby. He's like, these things look like Xeroxes of Jack Kirby with the inane, unfunny dialogue all over it. And I remember thinking, like, this prick, he doesn't get us. This old Kaji son of a bitch. I was super furious. And then, of course, within a couple of years, he and I were we were paired together at a signing. And I had to sit next to this guy. He was like, how's your convention going? He was nothing but friendly and nice. And I didn't tell him that he had ripped me to pieces. I don't know if he remembered. But that's how I felt today, critiquing this book, is that I hope Jaimie, Kool, and Kristal say, fuck that guy. We're going to keep going. We're going to double down and be even better. Because, art is subjective, and you only get better at your craft the more you do it. And maybe one day, Jaimie or Kool or Kristal will be next to me at a signing and biting their tongue, my opinion. But I'll say Stephen Grant was right. Maybe that first book was a little rough, and we were really leaning into our influences. We wanted to reproduce the art that we had seen, and it took a while for us to take those influences and find our own voice and put our own stamp on things. And I think that's the strongest thing you could do as a creator, is find a unique take on things that you love that only you could write or say or draw.
Well, I should mention, we had the shoe on the other foot here recently. I submitted Deconstructing Comics to a podcast critique show called Podcast Rodeo Show. I sent them an episode I did with Ryan Cecil Smith recently on a book whose title I've now forgotten. But it was a little frustrating because he misunderstood something I said, and he pounced on this one place where I should have edited out some fumfering around that I didn't. And I was just asleep and missed that one, I guess. I don't know. Well, actually, one piece of advice that he didn't realize he was giving me was that I needed to update my blurb about the podcast, because he read it on the air like, oh, gee, this is out of date. So I got in and updated it.
Well, you should have sent him a podcast that I was on. I think let's be honest, that was your big mistake.
And then he was also pouncing on Ryan's mic situation. Okay, well, there's a little hissing, but I mean, I don't know how much the listeners care about that. I think some really full-on podcast guys are really picky about audio. Now, listeners, if you think our audio is crap, please let us know. Maybe we can do something about it. But
I'm a professor. I teach comics, and we're getting towards the end of the year where the kids have to fill out a survey about how I do. They get to tell me and give me feedback on my teaching. So that's always getting that email when it comes out, a few weeks after the semester. They're like, we've collected your responses to your survey. And I'm like, oh, do I have enough strength inside me to open it up and find out what 20-year-old college kids think of me? For the most part, they're very, very kind. But I'm waiting for the one that's like, you know what? Maybe you should be working at a car wash. Because they're not wrong. Well, Tim, we did it again.
Yes, we made it. We got through a comic. Okay. So I did the spiel. Send us your comic. Podcast at deconstructingcomics.com. And this is Tim. Thank you, Jason.
This is Jason in Portland. Crushing dreams left and right.
We'll see you next time.